Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the October 2019 CDA vendor webinar. My name is Ahmed Tahir, and we'll be presenting along with my colleagues, Dr. Dan Pollock, Laura Blum, Wendy Wise, Heather DeVenders, and Amy Webb. We'll be presenting primarily CDA-related information that applies to the upcoming 2020 January release and some future updates. This webinar will be posted on the NHSN CDA submission support portal soon. We do have a lot to present, so let's get started. Dr. Pollock.
Thank you, Ahmed, and welcome as well to everyone on the call. If you would go to the next slide, please. And a reminder for those who are familiar with our release schedule and for those who are new to it, a outline of it. We are continuing with our one major NHSN application release a year. And that major is defined by changes that include changes in the NHSN surveillance protocol that are reflected in the application, transitions to new CDA versions that stem from those protocol changes are also timed to coincide with the release, and the effective date is January 1st, so that's a big day for us. We also have non-major releases during the year as needed, such as new components, minor change requests to the application, defect resolutions, and sometimes infrastructure maintenance and support. And next slide, Ahmed, thank you. So as Ahmed already indicated, we do have a major release coming up in early December, scheduled for December 7th. And defects will be, any defects that are found will be effective immediately post-deployment addressed. Change requests with effective dates will be effective January 1st, 2020. Release 10.0 is scheduled for summer 2020. Will include new neonatal component as well as change requests and defects that will be effective post-deployment. Next slide. And again, information that may be new to some and old to others is that we do have a defect list at the NHSN web page. That's a comprehensive list of our known defects for each release, along with information about when the schedule fix is going in. So with that, I will turn it back for the next subject, which is to drill down a little further into our patient safety component, release 9.4. Amir, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. Pollock. All right. So I'll go into defects corrected and new change requests for the 9.4 release, starting with patient safety. Defect 8886 was found during import of MDRO summary. Upon import, error message was being displayed stating the timing of AST to be required. We have corrected this as this field is optional. Defect 8638 was allowing succession management to occur when the set ID was not included in the related document section. This must be included so the correct CDA file gets updated. Defect 4648, SSI CDA was being saved when pathogen identified was set to no. This is now corrected, so pathogen identified must be yes. Defect 8910, CDA files saved with the pathogen E. coli would then have the pathogen displaying as Klebsiella oxytosa. This is fixed so the correct pathogen displays. Defect 5182 was allowing SSI to be imported without having the correct monthly reporting plan. Error message is now displayed if SSI is imported without having a monthly reporting plan. Defect 8790 now allows lab positive to be enabled for SIP and SIS rules. And lastly, defect 8917 corrected events from being saved without selecting drugs for the following pathogens as listed on this slide. Right, getting into the change request for 9.4, CR 1752, 1753, 1754, and 1755 are for the patient safety summaries. Report no events will now be included in the CDA. This update will change the CDA version from R2D2.1 to R3D3 for 2020 summaries. Supplemental documents listed below will be available on our website in the near future, and you should be able to find this in the toolkit. CR 1974 updates BSIs. The question in the screenshot will now be required. Additionally, the rules stated after the select all that applied message will now be removed, and central line will not need to be marked no if any updates or any of the questions are selected as yes. Supplemental documents listed here are also included with this update. CR 2189 will now add a new column, MSSA, along with report no events for MSSA to MDRO summary. CR 2182 is adding NICU 5 as a new location, and this location will also be available for the new neonatal component. CR 2192 is for our annual pathogen codes update. Please be sure to use the correct pathogen list as listed here, and note that the pathogen lists are now versioned. We have additional columns listed that are highlighted in green. Go to the next slide. A dialysis column is added. Another column for manual dialysis entries, soft alert, will now be included, and a new column for LOS MEN pathogens. CR 2216 updated business rules for CLIP chlorhexidine Rule 3 will be applicable for patients less than 4 months old, and not to patients greater than or equal to 4 months old and have chloro contraindicator set to yes. CR 2218 updates Chapter 17 business rules. Secondary BSI will now allow positive blood culture for previously unallowed scenarios. Business Rule 2 for VCUF specific events will now include other signs and symptoms. CR 2307 is updating rules for MDRO summary dated 2018 and onward. We noticed the fact-wide-in summary imported in NHSN for HOS LTAC, HOS PED LTAC, or HOS Rehab had mismatching values. The CR will run a script to save the data correctly, but CDA vendors should correct this data ASAP, so between now and the 9.4 deployment, the data imported is the correct field. Replace MDRO patient days and MDRO admissions with the total facility patient days and admissions. If CDI data exists, replace CDI patient days and CDI admissions with total facility patient days and admissions. Replace MDRO patient days and MDRO admissions with the total facility patient days and admissions. All right, and I will now turn it over to Laura Blum.
Thank you, Ahmed. My name is Laura Blum, and I'm one of the SMEs for the NHSN AUR module. Today I'll be telling you about defects and change request updates for the NHSN AUR module 9.4 release, which is planned for December 2019. Change requests 2125 and 2235, described on the next slide, encompass the AU option drug updates for 2020. Plasmamycin, eravacycline, omadacycline, baloxavir marboxyl, Arikayce, and colistin will be added. These drugs will be optional and can be reported for any year. Ceftatorin, ceftabutrin, ceftazoxime, sulfazoxazole, telithromycin, and ticarcillin clavulinate will be removed. These drugs must be excluded from AU CDA files beginning with January 2020 data. From January 2020 forward, AU files will fail to upload if these drugs are included. CR 2235 will change meropenem vaborbactam from optional to required for AU option data starting January 1st, 2020. Meropenem vaborbactam will still be optional for any year prior to 2020. With the changes from CRs 2125 and 2235, the range of drugs accepted by NHSN will be 85 to 91, depending on whether the files include the 6 new optional drugs. We'd like to get your input regarding our process for adding new drugs to the AU option. We've historically allowed 1 year for optional reporting for the new drugs before making them required. The same will be true for the 6 new drugs we're adding in 9.4. However, we'd like to hear feedback from you as to whether that's necessary. Would you be okay with making them required when we
Hello, Amy?
Oops, we may have lost Laura's audio.
Sorry about that. Not a problem. I can take over. Okay, so moving on to CR 2397. Heather or Wendy, would you let Laura know we've lost her audio? Thank you. 2397 is a CR to capture and save the author field vendor information in the AU CDA files. So if you've been paying attention to some of the emails that have been sent out about the AU synthetic dataset project, you'll know that this is related. This CR will allow your facilities to confirm that your vendor information has been added to those files. So the new variables that they can optionally include on some of their reports are the vendor ID and the SDS Valid ID. There will also be a brand new report called Line Listing Vendor Information for AU Data where they can get some more information. Okay, so moving on to AR option changes, CR 2316 will update the AR option pathogen list. So you'll notice that the Klebsiella aerogenes has been reclassified, or it has been reclassified from Enterobacter aerogenes to Klebsiella aerogenes, and we've removed certain species that you'll find on the anti-P tab in the IDM. Next, CR 2142 adds the ability to report no AR option events. So you're probably very familiar with the ability to report no events for the other HAI types. We're adding this to the AR option in the 9.4 release. So since some facilities, especially very small facilities, often have 0 AR options to report, AR option events to report for a given month, this will allow them to clear that missing data alert. And then finally, there was one defect for the AR option that will be fixed in 9.4, defect 8613. Originally for the Staph aureus files, they were not accepted unless the PVP2A result was before the PCR-MEC result. When this defect is fixed in the application, those tests will be accepted in any order. However, the workaround basically until December is to put the PVP2A result first, followed by the PCR-MEC result. And that is all the 9.4 updates. I'm going to turn it over to Heather.
Hi everyone. This is Heather DeBendris, and I'm another one of the AUR module SMEs. So NHSN conducts outreach to ensure data accuracy and completeness, and we use these outreach activities to better understand potential issues with reporting to the AUR module as well. So to be clear, these validation activities are not systematic ongoing validation efforts, and these activities are also not a time for us to manually correct any facilities data. As you know, NHSN cannot make updates to the data entered into the application. But when we do conduct these outreach activities for data accuracy and completeness, or because of a potential issue that's been identified, we prioritize this outreach based on any ongoing analysis activities, user feedback, and any defects or application updates. We also consider subject matter expertise and feedback. So today, I will review 3 recent data validation outreach activities and discuss key findings and some important reminders. Firstly, let's look at an outreach related to the AU option. So during review of AU option data, we made note of an unlikely or unusual antibiotic use based on subject matter expertise and knowledge of the current commercial drug availability. So we identified that some facilities reported use of piperacillin alone. However, piperacillin tazobactam is commercially available, but piperacillin alone is no longer commercially available. So we reached out to these facilities and asked that they let us know if these data are correct or if updates to their data were needed. In 100% of respondents that were tagged for reporting piperacillin alone rather than pip-tazo indicated that they do not use piperacillin alone. All facilities worked to update these data, and some mentioned an error which had miscoded pip/tazo as piperacillin, which had been resolved. So based on these findings, we want to remind folks to make sure to double check the mapping of piperacillin-tazobactam to make sure it's not being mapped as piperacillin alone, since as we've stated, piperacillin alone is no longer commercially available. The next data validation outreach activity I want to speak about relates to AR option data. As part of ongoing analysis of AR option data to ensure completeness, we identified 5 key pathogen, antimicrobial, or bug-drug combinations, and we targeted facilities with a large percentage of missing data for these key combinations. The key bug-drug combinations are listed on the right. Among the pathogens listed, if a facility was missing 10% or more of the susceptibility results for the corresponding antimicrobials, they were flagged for follow-up. Among the over 600 facilities that had reported at least 1 month of data to the AR option, 305 were flagged. To better understand the barriers to reporting these important data, we requested facilities review the pathogen antimicrobial combinations and their testing practices, and to let us know if their data needed to be updated, if they did not routinely test for the antimicrobials listed for the pathogens, if the facility sent these isolates out for susceptibility tests and was unable to record the final result in their system, or if there were other explanations for these levels of missing data. The majority of responses related to issues with capture and transmission of data. Based on these responses, we have a few reminders to share. Beyond ensuring files upload successfully into the application, it's important to conduct regular checks to ensure that susceptibility results are mapped correctly. One common example of this related to penicillin V and penicillin G. Several facilities had missing concept codes or incorrectly mapped values for penicillin V and G, which caused these results to import as not tested. On a related note, if the LIS does not differentiate between penicillin G and penicillin V, these susceptibility results should be listed under penicillin G, and it should be indicated that penicillin V was not tested. Also, isolates must have some susceptibility testing performed to be eligible for reporting. We saw issues with applying this protocol rule most frequently during outreach related to Candida isolates. So if no testing is performed, these isolates should not be uploaded into the application. AR data are complex, so we continue to conduct checks like these and to partner with facilities, vendors, and hospital systems to understand and improve data completeness and accuracy. The last outreach activity I want to mention today is again related to AR option data. We had an AR option analyst review data submitted to the AR option and create a list of facilities with changes in reporting practices. We prioritized these facilities for outreach to better understand potential issues with reporting AR data. These facilities had previously submitted AR data, but had not yet reported AR event and or AR summary data for 2019. So to help us better understand challenges associated with reporting, we reached out to these facilities to discover if the facility had no events to report for the months of missing data, if the facility was experiencing challenges with submitting event or summary data, and if and when they plan to resume submission. Most facilities indicated that a lack of data validation or concerns with data accuracy were the reasons that they were no longer reporting these missing data. While over half of the facilities we communicated with indicated data accuracy concerns related to internal reports or vendor issues, almost all facilities did plan to resume submission once those data accuracy concerns had been addressed, and some examples of those response categories are shown here. Overall, these data validation outreach activities show us that facilities are often not aware of what their data look like in NHSN. So this means when data in the application do not reflect data they see on their end, they don't always notice. As we stated, submission to this module is complex, and that means outreach often requires communication to facilities, vendors, and hospital groups, and continued collaboration between these groups. We will continue validation outreach activities moving forward, and we encourage our partners to incorporate validation into their processes as well. As outreach continues, you may hear from facilities or from us with data quality questions, so we appreciate your continued partnership. And as always, if you become aware of a data quality concern, please let us know. Thank you. Up next is Wendy Wise.
Thank you, Heather. I'm Wendy Wise, one of the AUR module SMEs. I'm going to give an update on AU synthetic data set validation. We shared this timeline on the last CDA vendor webinar call in April of this year. The key points I'd like to make today are that AU synthetic data set validation will be required for all AU CDA vendors. AU SDS validation materials are currently available on our website for all vendors. Beginning in 2020, we'll be verifying success for vendors wanting to get a head start on the process. All verified vendors and their software will be posted on a public-facing NHSN webpage that will be available in the new year. This will allow current and future customers to be aware of vendor services and successes with respect to the NHSN AU option validation. Then, beginning in 2021, all AU CDA files that do not contain required SDS information will fail to import into NHSN. An email was sent to all vendors on September 11th titled AU Synthetic Dataset Validation Steps for Vendors. In case you're looking for it, the email came from Ahmed, and it will show as being from his full name, Abdul Rahman Tahir. The email included the steps that you as a vendor should follow once you're ready to send the NHSN team your aggregated AU data in Excel format so that we can confirm you've aggregated the AU data properly following the AU option protocol. Remember, the AU SDS is intended for use in testing numerator and denominator data aggregation, not conformance to CDA AU reporting. To pass AU SDS validation calls for downloading the AU synthetic data set, processing it through your vendor system to appropriately aggregate the data, and then outputting it to an Excel file. Next, you would upload that file to an NHSN web service tool that will validate your aggregated AU data against an answer key. This last step of your internal testing can be done as many times as needed to check your aggregated data against the answer key. Beginning in January 2020, AU CDA vendors, once ready, may send the NHSN team the AU summary Excel file in order to receive confirmation of successful AU SDS validation. In addition to the Excel file, as part of the vendor registration process, please also include the following additional information: vendor OID, vendor name, vendor software version, and at least one technical point of contact. If any of the information above is missing, we will not process your request. Upon receipt of the above items, the NHSN team will test your Excel file to confirm it passes AU SDS validation. If the Excel file passes, an email will be sent to the vendor containing the SDS validation ID to be added by the vendor to their production AU CDA files. Additionally, the vendor name, software name, and software version will be published to a public-facing NHSN webpage to highlight successful AU SDS validation. If that Excel file fails, an email will be sent to the vendor indicating that the file failed, and it will list the errors received. The vendor can then resume testing internally, uploading their AU summary Excel file to the NHSN Web Service Tool as many times as is needed to not receive any errors. Once ready, the vendor would follow the same steps as outlined in the previous slide for submitting the AU summary Excel file to the NHSN team to confirm the file passes AU SDS. The most frequently asked question we get from vendors about this initiative is how often will I need to validate? The AU SDS validation process is expected to be completed once per vendor per software version. So starting in 2021, all vendors creating AU CDA files will need to have successfully passed the initial AU SDS validation in order for their AU CDA files to be either manually uploaded or imported via direct into NHSN. No vendor will be grandfathered in. All client facilities using the same software version will have the exact same information in the author fields of the AU summary CDA files. The NHSN team expects to require vendors recomplete the AU SDS validation process only when major changes have been made to the AU option protocol. However, vendors should also complete the revalidation process when major changes are made to their software that affect the AU summary data aggregation. The next most frequently asked question we get is, how do I obtain a vendor OID? The September 11th email that I referenced earlier contains the instructions as a PDF. I'll outline the steps today as well. Please note that vendor OID is sometimes referred to as a vendor application OID. Also note that the vendor OID is different and unique from the facility OID. Both OIDs will be needed on the AU CDA files. The vendor OID is assigned by FinTech and is unique for each vendor. Contact them via email at fintech@cdc.gov and include the information listed on this slide in order for them to process your request. Alternatively, you can contact them by phone. Just be prepared to provide the same information. In response to your email, you will receive a vendor OID. This OID cannot be used other than to include vendor OID in the CDA files for the NHSN program. Specifically, this vendor OID will be required in the author section of the AU CDA once the vendor passes AU SDS validation. Next, I'd like to show the author section of the AU CDA and the expectations for including AU SDS vendor information. This slide shows an example of the XML coding of the author field. The ID root must contain the vendor OID. The extension must contain the SDS validation ID. As a reminder, the SDS validation ID will be provided to the vendor after confirmation of successful AU SDS validation. Vendor name, vendor software name, software version and release are currently optional fields, but having this information will streamline the troubleshooting of issues. So I know this is a lot of information. Please note that we are working to get this information, which was presented today and also included in the September 11th last email, up on the web. This includes vendor protocol, instructions for obtaining a vendor OID, as well as frequently asked questions specific to AU SDS validation. The detailed AU SDS validation instructions and the downloadable AU synthetic data set are posted on the CDA Submission Support Portal's Innovation Tools website. The test data are provided in both CSV and MySQL format. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at NHSN CDA at cdc.gov if you have any questions about AU SDS validation. I have one more item to share today. We are in the beginning stages of creating an antimicrobial resistance synthetic data set. If you would like to be a participant in the pilot phase of AR SDS, please send an email to nhsncda@cdc.gov indicating your interest. Since we are in the early planning stages, I do not have specific timelines to provide you, but we are hopeful that we will have a beta release of AR-SDS sometime in 2020. So in closing, I'd just like to emphasize that should you have any questions about AU-SDS validation or even AR-SDS validation, so please email us. We appreciate the vendors that have reached out to us already. Your feedback and questions continue to help us refine our communication and planning efforts. For instance, because of the great questions you've asked, we saw a need for AU-SDS FAQs. As mentioned earlier, those FAQs are forthcoming. Thank you for your time today, and I'm going to turn things back over to Ahmed.
All right, thank you, Wendy. All right, so we'll move into the new changes for the dialysis component. Starting with CR 2193, we updated business rules for dialysis events. Positive blood culture should be yes if new antimicrobial start was a blood sample collected is set to yes. CR 2194, as mentioned previously in the annual pathogen update slide, for manual entry only, the user will receive a soft alert or warning when selecting a virus, parasite, or pyron as identified pathogen for positive blood culture. CR 2225 is for manual entry only at this time. In the dialysis event form for the 3 event types that are collected, which will be antimicrobial starts, positive blood cultures, pus, redness, swelling, each field will have the option to enter its own date field. Currently, they share only one date field. So for 2020, this will be available for manual entry. CDA will catch up in 2021. CR 2290 is to capture CDA vendor information in the author field. This will be stored in the database, and for now, this field will also be optional. All right, this slide here covers the compatibility changes occurring in 9.4 for patient safety and dialysis. BSI will be updated from R3D2 IG to the R3D3 IG. Patient safety summaries will be updated from R2D2.1 IG to R3D3 IG. And dialysis summary has a soft roll-on for R3D3 IG from the R3D1 IG. In 2019, in this current year, both versions will be accepted for dialysis summary, but from 2020 and onwards, only the R3D3 IG will be accepted. Right. Next, we'll move into the update for the biovigilance component. So we have CR 2278, which is for the annual update to the ISBT values. This updated list will be posted on our website under the toolkit, and it should be available. Right. Next, I'll go over a new functionality created for NHSN vendors. NHSN will now have a new functionality for vendors to request their facility's location data. Nothing new is required to use this service, as all requests and responses handled via direct CDA automation. Facilities have the option to opt out of using this service. Quick summary of vendor services. In order to use this function, vendors shall have an existing direct address that is active on our whitelist. Vendor must be able to consume JSON message. This will be the format used for registration, making a request, and receiving a response. NHSN is also providing each facility the ability to choose into allowing the vendor to use this feature within 90 days prior to the release. Opting in can be done at any time, and opting out can also be done at any time. NHSN sent out a letter to all facilities and all vendors to share with their facilities on September 6, 2019. This feature is only valid to those using a vendor. If you do not have a CDA vendor, this letter does not apply to you. If you did not receive this letter, please send an email to the NHSN CDA inbox. We have provided instructions on what a facility will need to do should they decide to opt out. And as mentioned earlier, facility can opt in and opt out at any time. They can always opt in even if they initially opt out. To use this feature, vendors must first register. In order to register, you must have a valid direct address. If you have more than one address, you will be allowed to use only one address. To obtain a vendor OID, as mentioned by Wendy earlier, please contact FinTech for this request. We will post a guidance document online soon. The screenshot here shows the information needed to submit registration. An action word is required, along with direct address, vendor OID, vendor name, and vendor TPOC. Once the JSON file for registration is submitted via direct, a confirmation email will be sent. Please note the new production direct address listed on this slide to send all vendor services requests to, which will be vendorservices@direct.nhsn.us. Additionally, we will be using a separate inbox to handle all vendor service related issues, NHSN vendor services at cdc.gov. This inbox will receive a copy of all communication being sent to vendor services and will be monitored by the CDA team. And I'll pause here for a minute if anybody wants to write this down. And again, these slides will be posted on our website. Currently, we are only allowing map location data of a facility to be sent to vendors via vendor services. Only location data for one facility can be requested at a time. Similarly, only one zip file may be attached per message. If you're a homegrown vendor, you may also request facilities location data as well. We do have future plans to add more services to this functionality. The response will be sent in the JSON format. Please see the screenshot. As you can see, we took the fields that are currently viewable in the NHSN UI for locations. We will have a guidance document posted on the website CSSP page, which will provide full details needed to use vendor services. Moving into our 2020 10.0 release. As you may be aware, NHSN is introducing a new neonatal component. This component will be CDA entry only, and there will not be any manual entry for event and summary of late onset sepsis and meningitis. This will be included in the R3D4IG. Please be on the lookout when it becomes available. This will also be posted on the CSSP webpage under Toolkit. And next, we have some vocabulary updates. NHSN is requesting feedback on our vocabulary tools and processes for maintenance and provisioning. This slide and the next one has specific questions that we would like to gather input from as many vendors as possible. Please review the slide after the presentation and send an email to Sheila at the address provided with your feedback. We will schedule calls for in-depth discussion if that would be of interest. Please send an email to our vocabulary, Sheila Abner. Her email address is sabner@cdc.gov. I will pause here in case anyone needs to write down her email address. All right, next are miscellaneous updates in NHSN. This slide is a display of the percentage of CDA imports versus manual entry or CSV import for procedures. The year-date range was selected to include completed quarterly CMS reporting. Besides AU and AR, which are 100% CDA import, notice that Lab ID and dialysis events are the highest at 64% and 74% respectively. MBRO summary remains the lowest. The percentage for most events are slowly increasing, as you may notice. Just a quick update for direct CDA automation. We are holding at 15 vendors sending via direct. The number of facilities sending via direct is slowly increasing and now is greater than 6,500 facilities. NHSN is constantly working to improve this service and looking to streamline the process. We have made many upgrades for direct. For those of you who don't use direct yet, it is a batch submission process with no immediate reply. Turnaround time is based on the volume of messages in the queue. If you are new to direct or want to learn more about direct, there is a direct toolkit on our NHSN website. Before you start your process, we do recommend that you schedule a call with us. We will be happy to discuss the direct process and recommend best practices. A developer and direct administrator join the call for a technical discussion. CDA support is available on the NHSN website. The first link is to the main CDA submission support portal. Other important links provided on this slide are to the CDA toolkit and guide to CDA versions. And just as a reminder, NHSN supports CDA versions that are valid for the past 2 years. A few more helpful resources may be found using the following links. The first one is the NHSN newsletter, release notes, and communication updates. And the last is the defect list and release schedule, as mentioned earlier by Dr. Pollock. NHSN Pre-Production Test Site, or NPPT, is available for all vendors. We are currently in the beta testing period for 9.4, which ends in NPPT this week. NPPT allows vendors to test their code and prior to NHSN deployment. To request a test site, please follow the instructions on this slide. When logging into NPPT, please read the important message at login. Any issues found in testing, send an email to NHSN CDA at cdc.gov. Future CDAs coming include a neonatal component planned to be added to the NHSN application in the summer of 2020, as mentioned earlier. It will include patient-level event and denominator for late-onset sepsis and meningitis. It will be CDA import only. For 2021, the AR summary will include report no event. Dialysis event will have the addition of the date fields being included via CDA. NICU summary for patient safety will have report no events for PED VAE and EMV days added. CR 2036, which has been postponed to 2021, will remove urinary system infection, USI, and it will now be its own major level event and will be separated from the UTI. Manual entry will only be allowed for USI. For 2021, CDAs for the outpatient component event and denominators are scheduled to be available as listed here on this slide. Outpatient is available in NHSN. It includes an event and denominator for same-day outcome measures, a new surgical site infection, SSI event, and a new denominator for procedure. If you would like an AmSearch test facility in the outpatient procedure component, complete the request form found at the following link shown on the screen and send to the CDA mailbox. As always, we welcome any feedback. If you are not on the CDA distribution email, please let us know. The CDA team is also offering one-on-one quarterly meeting with vendors. Send an email to the CDA inbox if you had not had the chance to schedule a call with us and would like to. Please be sure to include any topics of discussion so the proper team is on the call. All right, and this concludes our October 2019 CDA presentation. We will now turn off the recording and open up for any questions. Thank you.